I work in an archive. I will not tell you which one. For 19 years, I have cataloged the paper that other people decided to keep. Receipts, ledgers, correspondence that was never meant to be read twice. Most of it is dull. Boxes of requisition forms, carbon copies of carbon copies. Most of it deserves the silence it sits in. Some of it does not. This concerns a man named Elias Warne, a gasworks engineer, Cleveland. The year is 1889. I found his file the way I find most of them. It was misfiled, slipped into the wrong box, behind decades of municipal water reports, where no index would ever point a researcher. That is the thing people misunderstand about lost records. They are rarely burned. Burning leaves ash, and ash leaves questions. They are simply put somewhere no one thinks to look. A folder out of order is more permanent than a fire. Let me show you what was in it. Warne was 34 years old in the spring of 1889. He worked for a municipal coal gas plant, the kind that made the gas that lit street lamps before the electric wires came. He kept a careful hand. His notes are dated, numbered, cross-referenced. He was not a famous man. He left no monument, no patent that bears his name, no entry in any biographical dictionary I have searched. The only reason his name survives at all is that he wrote things down, and someone, for reasons I cannot name, decided the things he wrote down were worth keeping. In March of that year, he drafted a memo, 6 pages. He proposed a method of capturing the natural gas that was at the time being vented and burned off at oil wells across western Pennsylvania and Ohio, flared into the open sky, wasted by the millions of cubic feet. Warren's idea was modest: a pressure regulator, a simple valve, a way to let an ordinary household draw that vented gas directly for heat, cheaply, reliably. Without a meter, he filed the memo with his employer. He sent a copy to a patent attorney. It came back stamped, returned, shelved. That is the file I found. Before I go further, I want you to do one small thing. If you keep a record of anything, if you have ever wondered what was saved and what was quietly thrown away, subscribe to this channel. The archive only stays open as long as people keep asking to see it. The day the questions stop is the day the boxes go back into the dark. Now, let me set the room you are standing in. To understand why 6 pages about wasted gas would be stamped and shelved, you have to understand who owned the gas. And to understand that, you have to understand the company that, by 1889, had already learned to own almost everything it touched. By the end of the 1880s, Standard Oil was not simply an oil company. The historical record is plain about this, and I am careful to stand on what is documented. Through that decade, John D. Rockefeller and his associates had consolidated control of American oil refining to a degree that alarmed legislatures in a dozen states. The Standard Oil Trust, organized in 1882, gathered dozens of nominally independent companies under a single board of trustees, a legal structure invented precisely so that one could move many companies at once. By the close of the decade, contemporary estimates placed Standard's share of American refining capacity somewhere near 90%. That is documented. That is not in dispute. The method that built it is also documented. Standard did not simply refine better than its rivals, though it did. It controlled the things its rivals could not live without. It negotiated secret rebates with the railroads, so that every barrel a competitor shipped paid a toll that fed Standard's advantage. It bought the pipelines. It bought the barrel works and the cooperages. It owned the path the oil had to travel. And a company that owns the path does not need to own the oil. The flow comes to it. This was the logic of the age, and Standard had perfected it. What is less remembered is what happened to natural gas. In the 1880s, natural gas was a nuisance before it was a product. The wells drilled for oil produced enormous volumes of it, and there was no easy way to store it, and no national network of pipe to carry it. So they burned it where it came up. Flares stood over the oil regions through the night like a second, lower sunrise, visible for miles, a constant orange testimony to waste. Travelers wrote about reading newspapers by the light of burning gas fields at midnight. Men of business do not tolerate visible waste for long. Waste, to the right kind of mind, is only profit that has not yet been claimed. Standard's interests, and those of the investors who moved in its orbit, turned toward natural gas distribution during exactly this period. The historical record shows the Standard interests acquiring and reorganizing gas companies through the late 1880s, building toward the model that would define the century to come. Natural gas trust ventures formed. Pipe was laid into cities. The principle was not new. It was the same principle that had built the oil empire. Control the choke points, own the means of delivery, then charge by measure for the flow. A meter is a choke point you can hold in one hand. And here we reach the first thing I must say plainly, because saying it plainly is the only honest thing this work permits. I have seen the claim repeated in a great many places that the Gilded Age made free heat illegal, that powerful men sat in paneled rooms and passed laws to criminalize the burning of your own gas off your own land. I have not found that law. I have looked. I want to be careful here, because care is the only thing this work is for. I have searched the statute books of the gas-producing states for that decade and the next. I have read the franchise ordinances that cities granted to distribution companies. The record I can put in front of you does not contain a statute that made free heat a crime. There is no such page. What the record contains is something quieter and in its own way more total. It contains the patient construction of a system in which heat without a meter simply had no place left to exist. The land leases that bound the gas to the company that drilled it. The municipal franchises that gave one distributor the legal right to the pipe beneath a city's streets. The slow enclosure of a thing that had once blown free into the night, not banned, engineered out. There is a difference between a wall and a law, and the difference matters, and I will not pretend the law existed when what I hold is the wall. Hold on to that distinction. We will need it again. Back to Warne. His memo proposed the opposite of enclosure. Let the household tap the vented gas directly. No meter, no monthly account, no standing relationship with the distribution company at all. The gas was being wasted anyway, flared into nothing. He looked at a flare and saw a hearth. He looked at waste and saw warmth that need never appear on anyone's ledger. The return stamp on his file is dated April of 1889, 1 month after he drafted it. The notation in a clerk's hand, in ink that has gone brown, reads, "Not consistent with distribution interests." That is the phrase. I have read it perhaps 200 times. I could draw the shape of those letters from memory. Not consistent with distribution interests. Consider what the phrase admits. A municipal gasworks in 1889 had distribution interests. It sold manufactured gas by the cubic foot, measured at a meter, billed to a household at the end of the month. From the standpoint of that ledger, a device that let people burn unmetered gas for free was not an improvement to be rewarded. It was a leak to be sealed. Warne had not designed a furnace. He had designed a hole in the side of a revenue stream, so the memo was shelved. That by itself is an ordinary fact of commerce. Companies decline ideas that would cost them money every single day, and they are under no obligation to do otherwise. If that single stamped phrase were all I had found, I would not be sitting here at this hour, speaking to you. I would have refiled the folder and moved to the next box. But it is not all I found. The anomalies began with the second document. Warne wrote a follow-up 2 months later in June. It is addressed to no one. It reads more like a private note than a memo, the kind of thing a careful man writes to fix an unease in his own mind. In it, he describes a conversation with a man he names only as the visitor from the Eastern office. The visitor, Warne writes, advised him to withdraw the patent attorney's filing and let the matter rest. Warne records that he found this strange. His employer was a municipal works. It was a Cleveland concern, paid for by a Cleveland council. It had no Eastern office. Standard Oil had its headquarters in New York. I am not telling you the visitor came from Standard Oil. I want that to be exact. I am telling you that Elias Warne, a man who measured pressure for a living and trusted instruments over impressions, wrote down that a stranger from an Eastern office he could not place advised him to bury his own filing, and that he found it strange enough to commit to paper. A careful man records what unsettles him. The note is the record of his unease. The third anomaly is the filing itself. I went looking for the patent application. This should have been simple. The United States Patent Office is one of the most complete archives this country has ever maintained, and it was so by design. The American patent system inherited its logic from the Old English statute of monopolies, the law that 3 centuries earlier abolished the Crown's habit of selling exclusive privileges and permitted monopoly only for the true inventor of a new thing and only for a limited term. The bargain at the heart of it is this: you disclose your invention to the public fully so that anyone may learn from it. In exchange, you receive a temporary and limited monopoly. Disclosure was always the price of the protection. The whole machinery exists to pull ideas out of secrecy and fix them in the permanent public record. Nearly everything filed leaves a trace, an application number, an examiner's rejection, a notice of abandonment if the fee goes unpaid. The system is built to catch ideas, including the rejected ones, including the abandoned ones, and to hold them forever where any citizen can read them. Warne's filing has no trace, no application number, no rejection, no notice of abandonment. A man who hired a patent attorney who drafted 6 pages of technical specification, who described a regulator and a valve in enough detail to be examined, left nothing whatever in the one archive in the country built precisely to catch exactly that. Withdrawn, perhaps. Withdrawn early enough and quietly enough that it never entered the public record at all. There is a window, before an application is published, in which a filing can simply be pulled, and the system keeps no public memory of what it never finished examining. That is the second refusal I must make, and it is the harder one. I have seen gaps like this one held up as proof, as evidence of a vast and deliberate suppression, an idea hunted down by men in a tower and scrubbed from the record by hands that knew exactly what they were erasing. I cannot prove that. I will not pretend to. The absence of a record is not by itself a record of absence. A filing can vanish for reasons as dull as they come. A clerk's error, a misplaced fee, a change of heart by a tired man who decided the fight was not worth what it would cost him. I have cataloged enough vanished paper to know that most of it vanished by accident, by indifference, by the simple entropy that swallows everything no one is paid to protect. To claim every gap is a conspiracy is to flatter the powerful with a competence they rarely possessed. What I can do is lay the documents side by side and let you weigh them. A regulator that would have delivered heat off meter. A memo returned and stamped, not consistent with distribution interests. A private note about an Eastern visitor advising silence, written by a careful man who found the advice strange. And a patent filing that, against the entire design of the patent system, left no mark anywhere. I weigh those 4 things together. You are free to weigh them differently. That is the whole point of letting you see them at all. There is a 4th document in the folder. This is the one that kept me at the desk long past the hour the lights are meant to go out. It is a letter to Warne from another engineer, a man named Joseph Falk, dated late in 1889. Falk worked at a gas works in Indiana, 2 states away, a man who by every indication had never met Warne in person and knew him only through the small professional correspondence of their trade. The letter begins friendly. It does not stay that way. Falk writes that he had drafted very nearly your same regulator, that he had taken it to his own superiors, and that he had been advised, in his own words, to find other work. He had. He was writing from a new position, in a different trade entirely. The letter has the tone of a man warning a colleague away from a cliff he has already gone over. 2 engineers, 2 states, the same device arrived at independently, because a good idea does not respect a single mind, and the same quiet counsel to walk away from it. One man's misfortune is a coincidence. One stamped memo is commerce. But 2 engineers, unknown to each other, describing the same regulator and receiving the same pressure to abandon it, is at the very minimum a pattern. I am not required to explain a pattern. I am only required to record it, so I am recording it. What happened to Elias Warne after that? Not much, and that is its own kind of answer. He stayed at the municipal works for another 4 years. He was promoted once to a supervisory post over the metering division, which I leave you to consider. He never filed another patent of any kind. The careful hand that filled 6 pages in a single month never again, so far as the record shows, proposed anything to anyone. He died in 1911 of pneumonia in the same city where he had drawn his regulator 22 years before. The folder ends with his obituary, clipped from a Cleveland paper, 11 lines. It calls him a dependable man and a faithful employee. It does not mention the memo. It does not mention the regulator. There is no reason it would. By 1911, the matter had been resting, as the visitor advised, for a very long time. Now let me bring you to the part that sits in the room where you are sitting. The system that Elias Warne ran into did not stay behind in 1889. It did not lose. It won so completely that we have stopped being able to see it. Every unit of energy that reaches your home today reaches it through a meter. Your electricity, your gas, your water in most places now. The arrangement is so total that it has become invisible, the way water is invisible to a fish. You do not own the flow. You rent access to it, measured and billed, and the billing does not stop while you sleep, while you travel, while you grieve. The meter keeps its own faithful hours. This is the metered energy model, and it is printed on the statement that arrived at your address this month. It was built, in part, in the years when men decided that gas flared into the night sky was waste, and gas sold by the cubic foot was profit, and that any device which turned the first quietly into the second, without passing through a meter, was a leak that needed sealing. I am not telling you that this is a crime. I want to be as fair to the system as I have tried to be to the man it shelved. Meters made modern cities possible. They funded the pipe and the wire and the vast machinery that carries warmth to millions of homes that would otherwise have none. The bargain has real costs and real benefits, and reasonable people have weighed them honestly for more than a century. I am telling you only this. The bargain was not inevitable. It was a choice made by particular men in particular rooms in service of particular interests. There was a moment in a gasworks in Cleveland when one careful man drew a different line and proposed a different arrangement, and the record of that moment was returned, stamped, and shelved. Here is the defense I offer for keeping this file. When I am asked, as I am sometimes asked, why I do not simply let the dead and their paper lie, because someone already kept it. Someone misfiled Warren's memo rather than feeding it to a stove. Someone clipped a dependable man's obituary and slipped it into the same folder, decades after the memo, which means someone remembered. Someone preserved Falk's letter from 2 states away. I do not know who any of these people were. I do not know if they were 1 person or 4, a sympathizer or merely a careless clerk who could not bring himself to throw away another man's careful work. The record does not say. Perhaps there was no reason at all, but the paper survived. And as long as the paper survives, the moment it holds is not gone. It is only quiet. It is waiting for the next person who opens the wrong box. I have shown you everything I can prove, and I have marked, twice and on purpose, the 2 places where the louder version of this account runs out ahead of the evidence. There was no statute I could find that made free heat a crime. There was no document proving an idea was hunted down and erased by name. What there was instead was a regulator that would have let ordinary people burn wasted gas for nothing. a phrase not consistent with distribution interests, a note about an Eastern visitor advising silence, and a filing that vanished from the single archive built to remember it forever. You may decide that this is only commerce, doing the unsentimental thing that commerce has always done. You may decide it is something with a longer shadow than that. I only catalog, I do not conclude. The conclusion is the one thing I am not permitted to file. The archive was never destroyed. It was just buried. There is one more folder on my desk tonight. It is thicker than Warne's, much thicker, and the dust on it is older. It concerns a different family, a different decade, and a claim I have spent the better part of 3 months trying, and so far failing to disprove. The claim is this: that by 1922, the same interests that learned in the 1880s to own the path the oil traveled had extended their reach into medicine and held, through foundations and endowments and patient acquisition, the patents on very nearly every promising cancer treatment then under study in America. I have not disproved it. That is the folder I will open next. Until then, a small piece of advice from a man who spends his life among the things people meant to forget. Keep your receipts. You never know which one of them gets misfiled.